The rain arrived 5 minutes before the engagement ceremony. Guests hurried beneath crystal awnings while assistants rushed to protect expensive flower arrangements from the sudden storm. Camera crews complained. Musicians covered their instruments. Only one person stood perfectly still. Elena Hart. She watched the rain spread across the marble courtyard of the Ashford estate and felt an ache she remembered far too well. Exactly 7 years ago, it had rained like this. Exactly 7 years ago, she had smiled, accepted Adrian Ashford's diamond ring, and believed every promise he whispered. Exactly 7 years ago, she had unknowingly walked toward her own destruction. Then everything went dark. A laboratory explosion, burning steel, crushing concrete, the bitter smell of seawater, and Adrian's final words before abandoning her inside the collapsing research station. "I'm sorry, but the company can't lose both of us." He had chosen his empire, not her. She had died listening to emergency alarms. Now, she stood once again beneath the same gray sky, 28 years old, alive, holding the same engagement bouquet. Every face around her belonged to people who had not yet betrayed her. She closed her eyes. One breath. No panic. No tears. She had already cried enough in another lifetime. When she opened her eyes again, someone approached. "Miss Hart." The wedding planner smiled nervously. "Mr. Ashford has arrived." Of course he had. Right on schedule. Just like before. Luxury cars rolled into the courtyard. The Ashford family stepped out first. Investors followed. Reporters raised cameras. Then Adrian emerged. Tall, confident, perfectly dressed. The golden heir to Ashford Energy. The man every magazine called the future king of global power. In her first life, seeing him had made her heart race. Today, she felt nothing. Not anger. Not love. Only certainty. Because she already knew how his empire would fall. 3 years from today, Ashford Energy would invest nearly every remaining asset into an experimental seabed drilling network beneath the North Atlantic. The project would look revolutionary. It would also hide a fatal geological mistake. A fault line. An unstable methane reserve. One catastrophic collapse. Thousands of billions erased. Governments would investigate. Executives would resign. Families would turn on each other. Adrian would spend years trying to rebuild what could never be restored. Everyone would believe it was bad luck. Only Elena knew the truth. It had always been preventable, because she had discovered the warning signs. And Adrian had ignored her. Not once. Not twice. Dozens of times. He had laughed whenever she questioned his engineers. "You think like a scientist," he had told her. "You'll never understand business." Ironically, his business had died because it refused to listen to science. The orchestra began playing. Guests applauded. Her father leaned closer. "Sweetheart, it's time." He smiled proudly. "You've waited years for this." She looked at him quietly. Her father hadn't betrayed her. Not intentionally. He had simply trusted the wrong people. That mistake had cost him everything in her previous life. She would not let history repeat itself. Elena gently handed him the bouquet. "Dad." His smile faded. "What is it?" "I'm not getting engaged today." Silence. Even the rain seemed quieter. "What?" She spoke clearly, so everyone can hear. "I'm ending the engagement." Gasps echoed through the courtyard. Every camera turned toward her. Adrian frowned. "Elena." His voice stayed calm. "What are you doing?" She walked directly toward him. No hesitation. No trembling. No fear. In her previous life, she had always searched his face for affection. Today she searched only for honesty. She found neither. Adrian lowered his voice. "If this is because I've been busy lately, we'll discuss it afterward." Busy. That word again. Busy missing birthdays. Busy canceling vacations. Busy forgetting promises. Busy choosing meetings over people. Busy sacrificing everyone except himself. She smiled faintly. "No, it's because I'm finally awake." He stared. "What does that mean?" She reached into her handbag, removed the velvet engagement box, opened it. The diamond reflected the gray sky. Without another word, she placed it into his hand, then closed his fingers around it. "This belongs to you." Shock spread across every face. Someone dropped a champagne glass. Reporters rushed closer. Flashlights exploded like lightning. Adrian's mother stepped forward. "Elena, don't embarrass this family." Elena looked directly at her. "I'm preventing something far more embarrassing." "What nonsense." "One day you'll understand." Nobody knew what she meant. Nobody could, because she had already lived this moment before. She turned away. Behind her, Adrian called out, "You're making the biggest mistake of your life." She paused. Without facing him, she answered softly, "No, I already made that mistake once." Then she walked through the rain, leaving behind the engagement, leaving behind the Ashford name, leaving behind the future everyone expected. None of them realized. The woman walking away had just changed history. An hour later, Elena unlocked a small apartment she barely remembered owning. In her first life, she had abandoned it after moving into Adrian's mansion. This time, it felt like freedom. She opened an old storage box, research notebooks, ocean maps, prototype sketches. Most people saw random papers. She saw the beginning of a revolution. Deep beneath the ocean floor, there existed an untapped source of clean thermal energy no company had successfully harvested. Everyone believed it was impossible, everyone except her, because in another lifetime, she had almost solved it before she died. This time, she intended to finish. The morning after the broken engagement, every major business newspaper carried the same headline. Ashford heir abandoned hours before engagement ceremony. Television hosts debated who was responsible. Social media exploded with speculation. Some called Elena ungrateful. Others accused her of chasing attention. No one knew the truth. That suited her perfectly. She switched off the television before another commentator could mention her name. Noise had never built anything. Work did. By sunrise, she was already driving toward Harbor Point Research Institute, a modest government-funded marine engineering center overlooking the coast. In her previous life, she had declined their research offer because Adrian insisted she join Ashford Energy instead. "You'll have better resources with us," he had promised. He hadn't mentioned that every breakthrough she made would be claimed by his corporation. Not this time. The receptionist looked up as Elena entered. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to meet Professor Malcolm Reeves." The woman frowned. "He isn't expecting visitors." "He will." A few minutes later, an elderly man in a faded blue lab coat stepped into the lobby carrying two overflowing folders. Professor Reeves looked exhausted. His institute had spent years requesting funding for renewable marine energy projects. Every proposal had been rejected. "Miss Hart?" "Yes. I've read your graduate papers." His expression became curious. "You were supposed to join Ashford Energy. I changed my plans." "I heard." He hesitated before asking, "Why come here?" Elena smiled. "Because everyone else is drilling deeper. I want to build upward." Professor Reeves blinked. "What does that mean?" Instead of answering, she pulled a notebook from her bag. She opened it to a detailed hand-drawn diagram. Thermal vents, pressure channels, energy converters, cooling systems. A completely different way of collecting geothermal power beneath the ocean. The professor's eyes widened with every page. "Who designed this?" "I did." "When?" She paused. "I've been thinking about it for years." That wasn't exactly a lie, just not in the way he imagined. He turned another page, then another. His breathing became uneven. "This efficiency," he whispered almost to himself. "It shouldn't be possible." "It is. If these calculations are correct." "They are." He looked directly at her. "Do you understand what you're proposing?" "Yes." "A new energy industry." She nodded once. For nearly a full minute, the professor said nothing. Finally, he laughed. Not because he found it amusing, because hope had caught him completely off guard. "I've spent 30 years waiting for someone to challenge accepted theory." He extended his hand. "Welcome to Harbor Point." She shook it. For the first time since waking in her second life, she felt genuinely optimistic. Yet as they walked deeper into the laboratory, she noticed something strange. Several researchers stopped talking when she passed. One quickly folded away a newspaper. Another avoided eye contact. Professor Reeves sighed. "They've seen the headlines." "I assumed so. They think you came here because no private company wants you anymore." She smiled calmly. "They'll change their minds." "Confident?" "No. Certain." Across the city, inside the top floor of Ashford Energy headquarters, Adrian stared at Elena's resignation letter. It contained only one sentence. "Please consider this my final decision. I wish your company every success." Nothing more. No anger. No explanation. No request. That irritated him far more than a dramatic farewell ever could. His cousin Daniel entered the office. "So, she's serious." Adrian nodded. "Apparently." Daniel smirked. "She'll come back." "You think so?" "She has nowhere else to go." Adrian looked toward the skyline. Normally he would have agreed. But something about Elena yesterday had disturbed him. She hadn't looked heartbroken. She hadn't looked emotional. She had looked prepared, as though she'd already seen everything that was about to happen. It made no sense, yet the feeling refused to disappear. That evening, Harbor Point's oldest laboratory remained brightly lit long after sunset. Everyone else had gone home. Only Elena remained. She stood before a massive digital map of the ocean floor. Her fingertips traced a line across the Atlantic basin, then stopped above a region marked only by unexplored seismic data. In her previous life, she had discovered unusual thermal activity there 6 months before Ashford Energy launched its disastrous drilling operation. She had tried to warn Adrian repeatedly. He ignored every report. This time, she would reach the site first. She quietly whispered to the empty laboratory, "I won't spend another lifetime proving I was right." Outside, waves crashed against the harbor wall. Far beyond the darkness, the ocean waited, and somewhere beneath its surface lay the future that could either save the world or destroy an empire. 3 weeks later, Harbor Point Research Institute no longer felt like a forgotten government laboratory. It felt like a battlefield, not against nature, against disbelief. Every morning, Elena arrived before sunrise. Every night, she was the last person to leave. Coffee cups gathered beside stacks of calculations. Whiteboards filled with equations were erased and rewritten. Metal prototypes appeared on workbenches only to be dismantled hours later. The researchers began calling one corner of the laboratory Elena's storm, because whenever she worked there, something impossible usually happened. Still, not everyone believed in her. During the weekly project review, senior engineer Victor Hale crossed his arms. "This design won't survive deep-sea pressure." Elena calmly adjusted the digital model. "Not with titanium." Victor nodded. "Exactly." She replaced one material with another. Ceramic metal lattice. Several engineers frowned. Victor almost laughed. "That alloy exists only on paper." It did. Everyone looked at her. She corrected herself without missing a beat. "It exists in experimental manufacturing." Professor Reeves leaned forward. "You found a supplier?" "I know someone who can make it." Again, it wasn't entirely true. In her previous life, a small startup had developed the material 2 years later before being bought and quietly shut down by one of Ashford Energy's competitors. This time, she intended to reach them first. Professor Reeves smiled. "Arrange the meeting." That afternoon, Elena drove nearly 4 hours to an abandoned industrial district outside Greyport. The building she entered looked more like a warehouse than a technology company. Paint peeled from the walls. Machines rattled with age. Only 6 employees worked inside. None of them looked optimistic. A young man in grease-stained overalls approached. "We're closed. I'm looking for Noah Mercer." "I am Noah." He couldn't have been older than 30. Bright eyes. Sleepless face. Brilliant mind. Completely overlooked by the industry. Exactly as she remembered. She extended her hand. "My name is Elena Hart." "I know." His expression shifted awkwardly. "You were engaged too?" "Not anymore." "Right." Silence settled between them. Finally, Noah asked, "What do you want?" She looked around the workshop. "I want to stop you from making the biggest mistake of your life." His smile disappeared. "What?" "In 3 months you'll sell your patents." His eyes narrowed. "Who told you that?" "No one. We haven't announced anything." "I know." His heartbeat seemed to quicken. "Then how?" "Because the people buying your company don't care about your technology." She pointed toward a half-finished alloy panel. "They only want to bury it." The room became silent. One employee slowly looked toward Noah. Another stopped welding. Noah stared at Elena for several long seconds, then quietly asked, "Who are you?" She smiled. "Someone making a better offer." Across the country, Ashford Energy prepared for its largest shareholders' conference in company history. Adrian stood before a massive presentation screen. Charts climbed upward. Profits increased. Expansion plans stretched across oceans. Applause echoed through the room. Then an elderly investor raised his hand. "Mr. Ashford." "Yes." "We've heard rumors that Harbor Point has recruited Dr. Elena Hart." Adrian's expression barely changed. "So I've heard. Should we be concerned?" A few executives exchanged amused glances. "Concerned? Over one researcher joining an underfunded institute? Ridiculous." Adrian answered smoothly. "Miss Hart is talented." A brief pause. "But innovation requires capital. Our competitors have ideas." We have the resources to make them reality. The investors seemed satisfied. Only one person remained unconvinced. Board member Evelyn Cross. She had spent decades studying technological disruption, and she knew one dangerous truth. History rarely favored the richest company. It favored whoever solved tomorrow's problem first. Back at Harbor Point, Professor Reeves entered Elena's laboratory carrying exciting news. The ministry approved preliminary funding. Elena looked up from her computer. So quickly, they were impressed. He laughed. I may have exaggerated your progress a little. How much? I told them we were 6 months ahead. She blinked. We're barely 6 weeks in. I know. For a moment, both of them simply stared at each other. Then they burst into laughter. The tension finally eased, until a security alarm interrupted everything. A technician rushed inside. Professor, what happened? Someone tried accessing our prototype server. The room froze. Elena stood immediately. External attack. Yes. Was anything taken? We don't know. Her smile faded. Too early. In her previous life, corporate espionage hadn't begun until much later. Someone had accelerated the timeline, which meant someone already considered Harbor Point a threat. Late that night, Elena reviewed security footage alone. Most cameras showed empty corridors. Then one recording caught her attention. A maintenance worker. Wrong uniform. Wrong identification badge. He paused outside Laboratory 3, only for 3 seconds, then disappeared. She zoomed in. The man's face remained hidden beneath a cap, but his wristwatch. She recognized it instantly. Ashford executives received that limited edition watch every year during the company's leadership retreat. Her eyes narrowed. They've already started. Only this time. She wasn't the trusting woman they once manipulated. This time, she intended to catch them. The attempted cyber attack changed everything. Within days, Harbor Point transformed from an open research institute into a tightly guarded facility. Access cards replaced ordinary keys. Security cameras doubled. Prototype files were divided across encrypted servers. Some researchers complained. Others welcomed the changes. Professor Reeves privately admitted something that surprised Elena. I've never seen anyone target us before. They're scared, Elena replied. He smiled. Of us? No. They're scared of becoming obsolete. Meanwhile, Noah Mercer arrived at Harbor Point carrying 3 large metal cases. Inside lay the first completed ceramic metal lattice components. They were lighter than titanium, twice as heat-resistant, and strong enough to survive enormous underwater pressure. Victor Hale lifted one carefully. I've never seen anything like this. Noah grinned. Neither has anyone else. Elena examined every edge. Perfect. Exactly as she remembered. Except now, the breakthrough belonged to the people who actually created it. Professor Reeves clapped his hands. Let's build prototype 1. Excitement spread through the laboratory. For the first time, even the skeptics looked hopeful. Construction lasted 12 exhausting days. Then came testing. Everyone gathered around the pressure chamber. A countdown began. Pressure level 1. Normal. Level 3. Still stable. Level 5. Victor frowned. It should be cracking by now. It wasn't. The chamber continued climbing. Level 7. Level 8. Finally, maximum pressure. Silence. No alarms. No fractures. No failure. The prototype remained intact. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then cheers erupted across the laboratory. Someone hugged Victor. Another researcher actually cried. Professor Reeves removed his glasses and quietly wiped his eyes. 30 years of frustration had finally produced proof. Elena smiled, but only for a moment, because she knew success always attracted enemies. The following afternoon, Harbor Point received an unexpected visitor. A black luxury sedan stopped outside the institute. Every employee looked through the windows. Adrian Ashford stepped out. Wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, he entered as though he still belonged in Elena's life. The receptionist nervously contacted Professor Reeves. Minutes later, Elena walked into the lobby. Neither of them spoke first. The silence carried memories only one of them truly understood. Finally, Adrian smiled. You look different. I am. I've noticed. He glanced around the institute. I never imagined this place would suit you. It suits my work. His expression softened. You left without giving me a real reason. I gave you one. No, you gave me a mystery. She folded her arms. Then let it remain one. He took a slow breath. My family overreacted. This isn't about your family. Then what is it about? She looked directly into his eyes. The future. He frowned. What future? The one you're rushing toward without seeing the cliff. For the first time in years, Adrian felt genuinely unsettled. What are you talking about? She almost told him. Almost. She could have described the unstable methane pockets, the catastrophic seabed collapse, the investigations, the bankruptcy, everything. But another memory surfaced. Her standing in a conference room, presenting evidence, being ignored, then blamed. She slowly shook her head. You wouldn't believe me. Try me. No. She stepped aside. You should leave. His voice hardened. You're making me your enemy. She answered without hesitation. I didn't choose that. You did. Long silence. Then Adrian nodded once. I hope you don't regret this. She met his gaze calmly. I won't. He turned and walked away. Neither of them noticed the young journalist photographing the entire exchange from across the street. By evening, the pictures were everywhere. Ashford Air visits ex-fiancé's secret project. Speculation exploded. Investors started asking questions. Competitors became curious. Harbor Point suddenly found itself under a spotlight it had never wanted. Inside her office, Elena stared at the headlines. They're watching us now. Professor Reeves sighed. Can we still stay ahead? Elena closed the laptop. Not by hiding. She looked toward the massive ocean map hanging on the wall. It's time. The expedition? She nodded. If we wait any longer, they'll reach the seabed before we do. Outside, thunder rolled across the distant coastline. The race had officially begun, not just to discover a new source of energy, but to decide which vision of the future would survive. The research vessel Endeavour left Harbor Point before dawn. Unlike the sleek ships owned by billion-dollar corporations, the Endeavour looked worn by decades of storms. Rust marked its railings. The paint had faded. Even the engine growled with age. Yet every person on board knew they were carrying something priceless. Hope. Elena stood at the bow, staring across the endless Atlantic. The cold wind whipped through her hair. In her first life, she had stood on another ship in almost the same place. That expedition had belonged to Ashford Energy. She had discovered the thermal vent field. She had celebrated with Adrian that night. 3 years later, he would use the same discovery to justify the drilling project that destroyed his company. This time, the discovery would never belong to him. Inside the operations room, Noah Mercer spread several digital maps across the table. Our survey drones can only cover 40% of the target zone before sunset. Victor frowned. That's not enough. It has to be. Professor Reeves looked toward Elena. You've been unusually specific about this location. I trust the data. Victor raised an eyebrow. Data we've never actually collected. She smiled slightly. We're about to. Nobody questioned her further. By now, they had learned something strange about Elena. Whenever she spoke with certainty, reality usually caught up later. Hours passed. Autonomous underwater drones disappeared beneath the waves. Everyone watched live sonar readings. Most of the seabed looked exactly as expected. Rock, sediment, deep trenches. Nothing extraordinary. Then, one monitor flashed bright orange. The operator leaned closer. That's impossible. Another signal appeared. Then another. Within seconds, the display lit up like a constellation. Professor Reeves whispered, "Thermal activity." Victor shook his head. "No, there shouldn't be this many vents." Elena silently watched the screen. Exactly. Because every existing geological model was wrong. The vents weren't isolated. They formed an enormous, interconnected network, far larger than anyone had imagined. Noah slowly turned toward Elena. You already expected this. She answered carefully. I believed it was possible. 3 hours later, the first remotely operated vehicle reached the ocean floor. Its cameras sent crystal-clear images back to the ship. The entire control room fell silent. Towering mineral formations stretched into the darkness. Streams of shimmering superheated water rose through black volcanic stone. The vents pulsed like the heartbeat of the earth itself. One technician whispered, "It's beautiful." Professor Reeves couldn't speak. He simply stared. After decades of rejection, he was witnessing the discovery of his career. Elena's hands tightened around the edge of the console. She remembered another image. Another control room. Another lifetime. Smoke. Fire. Emergency alarms. Bodies running. This place had once become her grave. Not today. Temperature readings? 403 degrees. Pressure. Stable. Flow rate. Higher than predicted. Noah smiled. If we can regulate this. Victor finished the sentence. We've just found the cleanest geothermal source on Earth. Cheers erupted. Several researchers hugged one another. Someone opened an emergency bottle of champagne they'd secretly hidden aboard. Even Professor Reeves laughed louder than anyone had ever heard. Only Elena remained quiet, because she noticed something no one else did. A faint vibration. Tiny. Almost invisible. The underwater camera shook for less than a second, then stabilized. Her expression changed instantly. Zoom out. The operator obeyed. The wider view revealed something disturbing. A long fracture stretching beneath the vent field. Exactly where she remembered it. Still dormant. Still dangerous. She felt a chill. History hadn't changed as much as she hoped. The fault line still existed. It simply hadn't awakened yet. That evening, the crew celebrated while Elena stood alone on the deck. Professor Reeves joined her carrying 2 mugs of coffee. You should be smiling. I am. Not enough. He handed her 1 mug. You've just changed energy science forever. She accepted it. I've only changed the beginning. He studied her face. You're worried. Yes. About competitors? No. The ocean. He laughed softly. The ocean has always been dangerous. She looked toward the dark horizon. It can become much worse. Hundreds of miles away. Inside Ashford Energy headquarters, Adrian entered an emergency board meeting. Every director looked unusually tense. Evelyn Cross projected satellite images onto the wall. Our monitoring division tracked Harbor Point's research vessel. Adrian frowned. So, they found something. What kind of something? She enlarged the image. We don't know. But they've remained stationary for 16 hours. Another executive smiled dismissively. A government research trip. Probably another academic paper. Evelyn ignored him. No. I've spent 40 years watching this industry. Nobody protects an ordinary research mission like this. She looked directly at Adrian. If Elena Hart is leading that expedition, we need to know what she's found. The room fell silent. For the first time, Ashford Energy officially viewed Harbor Point as a competitor. Late that night, an encrypted message arrived aboard the Endeavour. No sender. No signature. Only 1 sentence. You aren't the first to find it. Elena read the message twice. Then a 3rd time. Her pulse slowed. Someone else knew. Not about the discovery. About the exact location. And only a handful of people should have been capable of that. Someone was moving pieces she couldn't yet see. The anonymous message changed the mood aboard the Endeavour overnight. The laughter disappeared. Celebration turned into caution. By sunrise, every research file was copied onto encrypted storage drives, and communication with Harbor Point was reduced to secure channels only. Noah looked exhausted. You think someone hacked us again? Elena shook her head. No. This feels different. How? They wanted us to know they're watching. Professor Reeves folded his arms. Then they're trying to frighten us. They've succeeded. She wasn't afraid for herself. She was afraid someone else already understood how valuable the vent field truly was. At noon, the underwater drones began a second survey. This time, Elena ordered them deeper than anyone had planned. Victor objected immediately. The pressure increases dramatically below that ridge. I know. We could lose the drone. We'll build another. Reluctantly, he agreed. The drone descended. 600 meters. 800. 1,000. The live feed suddenly flickered, then stabilized. The seabed changed completely. Instead of volcanic rock, polished metallic surfaces reflected the drone's lights. The operator frowned. Is that machinery? Noah leaned over his shoulder. It can't be. The camera moved closer. Everyone in the control room stopped breathing. Buried beneath decades of mineral deposits, rested the remains of an enormous deep-sea platform. Not modern, not ancient, just old enough to have been forgotten. Professor Reeves whispered, "Someone built down here." Victor looked stunned. When no records mention anything like this. Elena's heartbeat echoed in her ears. She recognized the structure instantly, not from history books. From her first life, Ashford Energy had found the wreck during the drilling project. Executives classified it immediately. The public never learned it existed. Adrian had called it an irrelevant industrial relic. She had never believed him. Now she finally had another chance to uncover its secrets. Bring the drone inside. The robotic arm slipped through a collapsed entrance. Dust drifted through the water. Broken control panels lined the walls. Corroded cables floated like seaweed. Everything appeared abandoned, until one monitor unexpectedly flickered. A weak green light glowed. The entire control room aboard the Endeavour froze. Noah whispered, "That's impossible. There shouldn't be any power." The screen flashed once, twice, then displayed a single line of text. Authorized personnel only. Before anyone could react, the feed went black. Every monitor lost signal simultaneously. Drone offline. Connection lost. Try backup frequencies. Nothing. The drone had vanished. Back in Harbor Point, news of the successful expedition spread despite the secrecy. Government officials requested meetings. Universities asked for partnerships. International investors began calling Professor Reeves directly. The Forgotten Institute suddenly became the center of global attention. Not everyone celebrated. Inside Ashford Energy, emergency strategy sessions continued day and night. Evelyn Cross placed a folder before Adrian. "We've confirmed Harbor Point discovered a major geothermal field." He remained calm. "So we accelerate our own exploration." She hesitated. "I don't recommend that." "Why?" She slid another document across the table. "It's an independent seismic analysis." Adrian scanned the report. His expression slowly changed. "A fault line?" "Yes. It runs beneath the same region." He looked up. "So, if the geological model is accurate." She paused. "Large-scale drilling could destabilize the seabed." The room became silent. One director laughed dismissively. "The model is theoretical." Another nodded. "We've ignored worse warnings before." Adrian closed the folder. "We'll review it." But Elena's strange words returned to him. "The future you're rushing toward without seeing the cliff." For the first time, he wondered whether she had been trying to warn him. That evening, Elena returned to the laboratory after the expedition. She expected exhaustion. Instead, she found chaos. Security officers surrounded her office. Professor Reeves met her in the hallway, his face pale. They broke in. Her stomach tightened. "What was taken?" "Nothing." "Are you sure?" "They searched everything. But they left empty-handed." She hurried inside. Drawers had been opened. Computers dismantled. Cabinets forced apart. Yet one object remained exactly where she had hidden it. An old notebook from her first life. Not because the thieves had missed it, because they hadn't known what it meant. She opened it carefully. Between 2 pages rested a folded sheet of paper she had almost forgotten. It wasn't her handwriting. She unfolded it slowly. Only 5 words were written across the page. "Don't trust the board. Ever." No signature. No date. No explanation. She stared at the message. In her first life, she had never found this note. Someone had hidden it before she died. Someone inside Ashford Energy had tried to warn her. And that person might still be alive. For 3 nights, Elena barely slept. The 5 handwritten words haunted every quiet moment. "Don't trust the board. Ever." She examined the note under ultraviolet light. Nothing. She checked for hidden impressions. Nothing. The paper itself was ordinary. Only the ink caught her attention. Dark blue. Hand-filled fountain pen ink. Not common. Not disposable. Whoever had written it cared about details. Or belonged to an older generation. She closed her eyes. In her first life, Ashford Energy's board had consisted of 11 directors. 6 were obsessed with quarterly profits. 3 simply followed the majority. 1 resigned before the disaster. Only 1 had ever shown genuine concern whenever Elena questioned the drilling plans. Evelyn Cross. But Evelyn had never spoken privately to her. Had she? The memories felt incomplete. There had always been meetings. Reports. Deadlines. Then the explosion. Perhaps she had overlooked something. Professor Reeves knocked softly on her office door. "You've been here all night." "I'm fine." He smiled knowingly. "No, you're working. There's a difference." He placed a folder on her desk. The ministry approved the next funding stage. Elena looked up. "So soon. They're calling our vent field the most important energy discovery in decades." She opened the folder. Her smile faded almost immediately. "What's wrong?" Reeves asked. She turned 1 page toward him. "The funding comes with a condition." He adjusted his glasses. "International industrial partnership?" She nodded. "They want private companies involved." Professor Reeves sighed. "They're worried commercialization will take too long. They're worried about politics." Both understood what that really meant. Large corporations would soon circle Harbor Point like sharks. The prediction came true 48 hours later. Representatives arrived one after another. global mining firms, energy giants, investment groups. Each offered billions. Each wanted exclusive rights. Each promised to change the future together. Elena rejected every proposal. Politely, firmly, without negotiation. Some executives smiled politely. Others left angry. One quietly warned Professor Reeves, "You're making dangerous enemies." On Friday morning, another visitor appeared. Not a businessman. Not a politician. Evelyn Cross. She arrived alone. No assistants. No media. No Ashford security. The 80-year-old director walked slowly into Harbor Point carrying only a leather briefcase. Professor Reeves welcomed her cautiously. "What brings you here?" She answered without hesitation. "I'm here to speak with Dr. Elena Hart." They met inside a quiet conference room overlooking the harbor. For nearly a minute, neither woman spoke. Finally, Evelyn placed an old fountain pen on the table. Dark blue ink stained the silver nib. Elena's heartbeat quickened. "The note." Evelyn nodded once. "I wrote it." The room became completely silent. "You found it?" "I did. I wasn't sure you ever would." Elena leaned forward. "Why?" Evelyn's tired eyes drifted toward the window. "Because I failed you once." A strange sentence. Failed. Once. Not before. Once. As though she carried guilt from another ending. Elena studied her carefully. Impossible. No. There had only been one rebirth. Hadn't there? Evelyn noticed the confusion. "Don't misunderstand. I haven't lived another life." Relief quietly settled over Elena. "I meant." The elderly woman continued. "I failed you during your first years at Ashford. I watched brilliant people get ignored. I watched executives bury inconvenient research. And I convinced myself someone else would stop them." She looked directly into Elena's eyes. "I was wrong." Evelyn opened her briefcase. Inside lay several confidential files. She slid them across the table. "I resigned this morning." Elena blinked. "What?" "I no longer work for Ashford Energy." Professor Reeves looked stunned. "You resigned from one of the most powerful companies in the world." "I resigned from people who stopped listening." Elena opened the first file. Internal drilling plans. Board votes. Private geological assessments. One page immediately caught her attention. Her breathing stopped. The coordinates. Exactly the same thermal field. Ashford had already chosen it. Their first exploratory drilling operation would begin in 23 days. 3 months earlier than in her previous life. History wasn't repeating. It was accelerating. Evelyn quietly said, "They moved the schedule after hearing about your expedition." Professor Reeves looked horrified. "They're going to drill directly above the fault line." "Yes." "They don't know. They don't want to know." Elena closed the folder. "No. They've seen enough warnings. They've simply chosen profits." Meanwhile, Ashford Energy headquarters buzzed with confidence. The board had approved an emergency expansion plan. Executives toasted champagne. Stock prices climbed. News channels praised Adrian's decisive leadership. Only Adrian remained uneasy. His assistant entered hurriedly. "Sir." "What?" Director Cross resigned. His face changed. "What reason?" "Officially, retirement." "And unofficially?" The assistant hesitated. She said, "Some companies collapse long before their buildings do." That evening, Adrian drove alone. Not toward home. Toward Harbor Point. Halfway there, he pulled onto an empty overlook facing the ocean. He sat silently for nearly an hour. He remembered Elena standing in the rain. "I'm preventing something far more embarrassing." He remembered her warning. "You're rushing toward a cliff." He remembered her eyes. Not angry. Certain. He had spent weeks convincing himself she was bluffing. Now, he wasn't so sure. The emergency board meeting began at exactly 9 o'clock Monday morning. Every seat was filled. Every screen displayed the same presentation. Project Abyss, Early Deployment Strategy. Adrian stood before the directors. His prepared speech remained untouched. Instead, he asked one unexpected question. Who approved moving the drilling schedule forward? The room fell quiet. Chairman Leonard Ashford, his uncle, answered calmly. The board. Without consulting engineering? The opportunity won't wait. Adrian frowned. The seismic review hasn't been completed. Leonard smiled. Since when have you become so cautious? Several directors chuckled. Adrian didn't. Across town, Harbor Point held its own meeting. Unlike Ashford's polished boardroom, the Institute's conference hall overflowed with engineers, marine biologists, government observers, and safety experts. Elena stood before a giant digital map. She pointed directly at the glowing fault line beneath the vent field. If large-scale drilling begins here, she highlighted several underground chambers. Pressure will transfer through these methane reservoirs. The animation spread rapidly. Then, a simulated collapse. Entire sections of the seabed fractured. Shockwaves rippled across the ocean floor. Silence filled the room. One government official whispered, "Could this really happen?" Elena answered honestly, "If we're wrong, we lose funding. If we're right, we save thousands of lives." The ministry requested independent verification immediately. 3 separate geological teams began reviewing Harbor Point's findings. Elena welcomed every question, every challenge, every criticism, because unlike Ashford Energy, science became stronger when tested. 4 days later, the first independent report arrived. Its conclusion stunned everyone. Harbor Point's risk assessment is credible. A second report followed, then a third. Each reached nearly the same conclusion. The fault line represented a serious hazard. Professor Reeves smiled for the first time in days. "We've done it." Elena remained quiet. "Not yet." "Why?" "They still have a choice. And people don't always choose wisely." She was right. Ashford Energy dismissed every report publicly. Chairman Leonard appeared on television. "Our experts remain fully confident. Our project will proceed as planned." Stock markets reacted positively. Investors applauded his confidence. Only one person inside the company openly disagreed. Adrian. That night, Adrian unlocked a forgotten archive room inside company headquarters. Boxes filled with decades of engineering records surrounded him. He searched for one thing: Elena's original research. It took 3 hours. Finally, he found a sealed storage box labeled Heart, Elena, Internal Proposals. He opened it. Inside rested dozens of reports. Every one marked the same way. Rejected. He began reading. The deeper he looked, the paler he became. She had predicted equipment failures. Rejected. She had questioned drilling assumptions. Rejected. She had requested expanded seismic surveys. Rejected. She had proposed vent-based geothermal harvesting instead of destructive extraction. Rejected. Every report carried handwritten comments from executives. Too expensive. Not commercially useful. Unrealistic. His hands trembled. Not because Elena had been wrong, because she had been right. Years before anyone else. He reached the final report. Unlike the others, it had never been officially reviewed. Someone had removed it before the board meeting years ago. Attached to it was an internal routing slip. Signed, not by an engineer, not by a scientist, by Chairman Leonard Ashford. "Do not present this to the board." Adrian stared at the signature. His breathing slowed. The truth hit harder than any explosion. Elena hadn't been ignored. She had been deliberately silenced. Outside his office window, the city lights shimmered against the harbor. Far beyond them, somewhere beneath the dark Atlantic, the future waited. And for the first time in his life, Adrian wondered if the greatest threat to Ashford Energy had never been Elena walking away. It had been the people he had trusted all along. The storm warning reached the Atlantic before sunrise. Meteorologists predicted 70-knot winds, waves higher than 12 meters. Every commercial vessel received an order to return to port, except one. Ashford Energy's first offshore drilling platform had already begun towing equipment toward the fault zone. Chairman Leonard Ashford refused to delay. "Every day we wait costs millions." No engineer argued aloud, but many exchanged uneasy glances. At Harbor Point, Elena stood in the Emergency Operations Center watching the same weather reports. Professor Reeves entered with alarming news. "They've ignored the warnings. I expected they would. The ministry can file another injunction. They won't act fast enough." Victor looked up from the radar display. "The platform will reach the drilling site tomorrow morning." Silence filled the room. No one wanted to say what everyone was thinking. If drilling began before the legal process finished, history could repeat itself. Only this time, Elena refused to stand by. She looked around the room. "We're going out." Professor Reeves frowned. "In this weather?" "Yes. We're scientists, not rescuers." She met his gaze. "We're both." Within 2 hours, the Endeavour sailed once more. This voyage felt nothing like the first. No excitement. No celebration. Only urgency. Government inspectors joined the crew. Independent geologists boarded with sealed evidence cases. Every document had one purpose: stop the drilling before it began. Meanwhile, Ashford Energy's command ship approached the fault zone. Adrian stood inside the bridge, staring at sonar displays. The ocean looked calm enough, but something troubled him. The seismic sensors. Tiny tremors. Barely noticeable. He turned toward Chief Engineer Marcus Doyle. Have these readings been verified? Marcus nodded. Twice. They're increasing. Only slightly. Adrian remembered Elena's simulation. Small vibrations. Pressure transfer. Methane chambers. His jaw tightened. I want another survey. Marcus hesitated. Chairman Leonard ordered us to begin positioning immediately. I gave you an instruction. Before Marcus could respond, the bridge doors opened. Leonard Ashford walked in. I overrule it. The room froze. Adrian faced his uncle. Without another survey, we're operating blind. Leonard smiled coldly. We're operating on schedule. The argument spread quickly across the bridge. Senior officers quietly stepped away. Nobody wanted to stand between the company's chairman and its future CEO. Leonard spoke first. You've changed. Adrian answered calmly. No. I've started reading the reports. A flicker crossed Leonard's face. What reports? Elena Hart's. Silence. Only the sound of waves striking steel echoed through the bridge. Leonard's voice hardened. Those theories belong in universities. They belong in this decision. They belong in the trash. Adrian stepped closer. You buried her research. I protected this company. You protected quarterly profits. I protected reality. No. Adrian's voice remained steady. You protected yourself. For the first time in years, someone had openly challenged the chairman. Hundreds of kilometers away, the Endeavor battled growing waves. The ship pitched violently. Equipment crashed against safety restraints. Several younger researchers turned pale. Noah fought to stabilize the drone systems. We'll lose communication if the storm gets worse. Elena looked through the rain toward the distant drilling fleet. We only need one chance. Professor Reeves quietly asked. And if they refused to listen? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she remembered another storm. Another ship. Another lifetime. The explosion. The screams. The choice Adrian had made. Finally, she whispered. Then we save whoever we can. By late afternoon, both vessels reached visual range. The sea roared between them. Ashford's massive drilling platform towered above the waves like a floating city. Compared to it, the Endeavor looked tiny. Yet every pair of binoculars aboard the platform focused on the approaching research ship. They actually came. Leonard laughed. They're desperate. Adrian wasn't smiling. He knew Elena didn't waste time on hopeless battles. If she had sailed into a storm, she believed lives were at stake. The government inspectors requested permission to board. Leonard refused. The weather makes transfer unsafe. The inspectors argued. International regulations. Emergency authority. Environmental law. Nothing changed his mind. Then Elena picked up the radio. Her voice echoed across both ships. Chairman Ashford. A long pause. You know who this is. I do. I have verified geological evidence. I don't care. You should. No. You should leave before the weather worsens. She closed her eyes briefly, then asked one final question. If you're so certain, why won't you look at the evidence? Leonard disconnected the transmission. Adrian stared at the silent radio. For the first time in his career, he felt ashamed. Night fell quickly. The storm arrived even faster. Towering waves slammed against both vessels. Lightning split the sky again and again. Inside the Endeavor's control room, alarms sounded continuously. Victor looked at the live seismic monitor. His face turned white. Movement. Everyone looked up. The fault line had awakened. Tiny at first, then stronger. Noah recalculated the pressure readings. Oh no. Professor Reeves hurried over. What? The methane chamber is expanding. Elena didn't hesitate. Contact every ship. Emergency channels opened instantly. Her voice remained calm despite the chaos. All vessels within Sector 12. This is Harbor Point Research. Evacuate immediately. Several commercial ships acknowledged. Fishing boats changed course. Cargo vessels increased speed. Only one transmission never came. Ashford Energy. On the drilling platform, warning lights suddenly flashed. Chief Engineer Marcus looked at the newest seismic data. This isn't normal. He ran another calculation. Then another. His breathing became uneven. Mr. Ashford. Adrian hurried over. What happened? Marcus swallowed hard. The pressure model. It matches Dr. Hart's prediction. Before Adrian could respond, The entire platform shuddered. Coffee spilled. Monitors flickered. Crew members grabbed nearby railings. Leonard shouted, "Maintain position." Marcus looked horrified. "We have to disconnect." "No. We'll lose billions. We'll lose everyone." The second tremor struck harder. Some equipment containers broke loose. Steel cables snapped. One drilling crane swung violently across the deck. Panic spread. Crew members rushed toward emergency stations. Adrian grabbed the radio. "This is Ashford Command. Immediate evacuation." Leonard lunged toward him. "I forbid it." Adrian looked directly at his uncle. "For once, I'm choosing people." He pressed the emergency broadcast button. The evacuation order echoed across the platform. Aboard the Endeavor, Elena heard the transmission. She slowly released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. He listened. Professor Reeves nodded. At last. But the danger wasn't over. Not even close. The platform had begun evacuation. Too late. A violent underwater shockwave erupted beneath the fault line. The sea itself seemed to rise. A massive wall of water surged outward. The drilling platform tilted sharply. Rescue boats slammed into support columns. One helicopter was forced to abort its landing. Through binoculars, Elena saw dozens of workers trapped near the upper deck. Without waiting for permission, she turned toward Captain Lewis. "Take us closer." The captain stared at her. "We'll be inside the impact zone." "I know. We may not come back." She looked toward the stranded workers. "I've already died once." The captain held her gaze for a long moment, then quietly turned the wheel. The Endeavor accelerated into the storm. Not toward glory, toward danger, toward the choice that would separate the people chasing profit from the people willing to risk everything to save strangers. As another wave crashed across the bow, Adrian looked through sheets of rain and saw the small research vessel heading toward the collapsing platform. He whispered only one sentence. "Elena." In that moment, he finally understood. The strongest person on the ocean had never been the heir to an empire. It had been the woman who walked away from it. The ocean became a wall of chaos. Towering waves slammed against steel. Wind screamed through twisted cranes. Emergency sirens competed with thunder. The Endeavor fought forward one wave at a time. Captain Lewis gripped the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. "If we lose another engine." "We won't," Elena replied. He almost smiled. "You sound very certain." "I have to." Inside, she wasn't certain at all, because this part had never happened before. In her first life, she had died before any rescue operation could begin. Everything beyond this moment belonged to a future she had never seen. The damaged drilling platform listed dangerously to starboard. Life rafts filled with workers struggled against enormous swells. One rescue boat overturned. Another lost power. Marcus Doyle shouted over the radio. "We still have 18 people trapped on the upper maintenance deck." Adrian looked upward. The access stairway had collapsed. The only remaining route was an exterior service crane swinging wildly in the storm. Without hesitation, he clipped on a safety harness. A crew member grabbed his arm. "Sir, don't. I'm going. You'll never make it." Adrian looked toward the trapped workers. "I asked others to risk their lives for my company. It's my turn." Aboard the Endeavor, Elena watched through binoculars. "What is he doing?" Professor Reeves followed her gaze. "He's climbing." The steel crane swayed violently. Every gust threatened to throw Adrian into the sea. Yet he kept climbing. One worker, then another. He secured safety lines and guided them toward an evacuation point. Not because he could save the platform, because he could still save people. Elena quietly whispered, "Good." Professor Reeves looked at her. "You expected him to run." "I expected the old Adrian." She paused. This one finally learned the difference. Suddenly, a deafening crack echoed beneath the sea. Everyone froze. The fault line shifted. Not enough to trigger the catastrophic collapse Elena remembered, but enough to tear apart the unfinished drilling assembly. Thousands of tons of steel twisted free. The enormous drill tower leaned. Marcus screamed into the radio. "Get clear." The tower collapsed across the empty section of the platform, crushing machinery instead of people. A cloud of steam erupted into the air. The platform shuddered, then stabilized. Elena stared in disbelief. History had changed. Not because fate had been defeated, because choices had been different. The evacuation had begun early enough. The drilling had never reached critical depth. Lives were saved. Rescue operations continued until dawn. When the storm finally passed, every crew member had been accounted for. Several injuries. No fatalities. Captain Lewis removed his soaked cap. I've spent 35 years at sea. I've never seen luck like that. Elena looked toward the horizon. It wasn't luck. It was listening. 3 days later, international news outlets carried only one story. Ashford Energy's drilling project halted after scientific warnings proved correct. Government investigations began immediately. Trading of Ashford Energy stock was suspended. Environmental agencies seized internal documents. Former executives rushed to hire lawyers. Professor Reeves walked into Elena's office carrying a newspaper. They're calling you the scientist who prevented the Atlantic disaster. She smiled faintly. I didn't do it alone. No, but without you. He never finished the sentence. He didn't need to. Meanwhile, Chairman Leonard Ashford appeared before a government inquiry. Evidence surfaced one document at a time. Buried safety reports, altered projections, suppressed geological assessments. Then came the final blow. Elena's original research proposals. Stamped. Signed. Intentionally hidden. The committee chairman looked directly at Leonard. Did you knowingly prevent these reports from reaching your engineering division? Leonard remained silent. His silence became the answer. Within 48 hours, he resigned. Criminal proceedings soon followed. The empire he had protected through secrecy collapsed beneath the weight of the truth he had buried. Adrian voluntarily stepped down as acting CEO. Many investors expected him to fight. Instead, he surprised everyone. At a press conference, he said only one sentence. We ignored the person we should have trusted most. The clip spread across the world within hours. 16 months later, the Atlantic Research and Energy Summit opened in Geneva. Scientists, engineers, and world leaders filled the enormous convention center. The keynote speaker received a standing ovation before saying a single word. Dr. Elena Hart. At only 30 years old, she had become the youngest scientist ever to lead an international deep-sea geothermal consortium. The project she had once sketched alone inside a tiny apartment had grown into a global initiative. Instead of drilling into unstable fault zones, the consortium harvested naturally circulating geothermal energy without disturbing the surrounding seabed. Countries that had once competed now shared technology. Former rivals became research partners. Professor Reeves sat proudly in the front row. Noah Mercer now headed an advanced materials laboratory supplying the entire project. Victor Hale laughed whenever journalists reminded him he had once doubted Elena's designs. I was wrong, he always admitted. And I'm grateful she proved it. After the ceremony ended, Elena stepped onto a quiet balcony overlooking the lake. For the first time in months, everything felt peaceful. Footsteps approached behind her. She already knew who it was. Adrian. He looked older. Not in years. In understanding. He stopped several feet away. Neither tried to shorten the distance. You've done something extraordinary, he said. She looked toward the water. So have you. He smiled faintly. I've mostly spent the last year apologizing. Sometimes that's necessary. I know. A long silence settled between them. Finally, he spoke again. I used to think success meant building the biggest company. And now, I think it means building something that survives your own pride. Elena nodded. That's a better definition. He reached into his coat. For one brief moment, she thought of another velvet box. Another rainy day. Another life. Instead, he placed a small brass compass on the balcony railing. It belonged to my grandfather. He believed every captain should know when to change course. I don't deserve to keep it. She looked at the old compass but didn't touch it. Why give it to me? Because you changed mine. He didn't ask for another chance. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He simply turned to leave. That, more than anything else, told Elena he had finally changed. She picked up the compass after he disappeared. Its needle pointed steadily north. Not backward. Forward. Months later, construction officially began on the world's first commercial deep-sea geothermal energy station. Reporters crowded around Elena. One young journalist asked, Dr. Hart, years ago you walked away from an engagement that everyone thought guaranteed your future. Do you ever regret that decision? She looked toward the ocean beyond the harbor. A gentle rain had begun to fall. It reminded her of another rainy day. The day she had returned to life. The day she had walked away. She smiled. My future was never waiting behind that ring. It was waiting beyond the horizon. The crowd applauded. As the cameras flashed, Elena silently thanked the life she had once lost. Without that painful ending, she would never have found the courage to choose herself. And somewhere beneath the calm Atlantic waters, the earth continued to release its quiet, endless heat, not as the force that destroyed an empire, but as the foundation of one built on truth. Only then did the full meaning of her journey become clear. She had walked away from an engagement because she already knew exactly how his empire would fall,